It's ClipperBlog Live. We are finally coming back after a little bit of time off. Fred Katz here, and we're going to be talking Sterling. We're going to be talking Ballmer. We're going to be talking anything else ownership. First time back in a little while, and first time on the show in a little while because he took a little hiatus before we went off as well, is Jovan Buha. Jovan, what's up?
What's up, guys?
And also in Los Angeles is we got two people. We have a guest star today, Patrick James, and somebody else.
Hey guys, I'm here with my daughter, Margot. It's just the two of us here. We're just hanging out, celebrating some new ownership.
I'm sure Margot has incredibly intelligent opinions.
Serious insight.
Really well thought out. She's got like the Darren Rovell inside information on that business, I'm sure. And I'm sure I've seen Darren Rovell make that face as well. So that's good news for our show. Let's jump right into it. Steve Ballmer coming in, taking over the Clippers. This obviously is not 100% official yet, but with Donald Sterling saying that he's going to drop the lawsuit, it seems like this is an inevitability that it's going to go through. $2 billion. It's the largest purchase of any NBA team in the history of the league, and really shows that after the Donald Sterling thing happened and everybody in the Players Association was saying, Adam Sterling, he's the players commissioner. Well, he's the same guy that made the Clippers worth $2 billion for the owners because he ate their lunch at the CBA a couple of years ago. So let's remember the context when we go through that stuff in the future. Patrick, just first of all, how big is this? You know, Donald Sterling has been around since the early 80s. How big is this that Sterling is finally out of not just the Clippers but the league in general?
It's kind of cool. The whole time I've been alive, the Clippers, for the most part, I guess, almost the whole time I've been alive, have been owned by Donald Sterling. They've been the worst franchise in American professional sports, and they've had the worst owner. That's kind of just indisputable. You know, their horrible record and, you know, just all of the bits and pieces of kind of tidbits of information we've heard over the years of like how things were run on the cheap to worse than cheap. That's been everything that surrounded this team, and now let's say people who are just growing up won't have that association with the Clippers. They're not that team anymore. They're not owned by this guy, and they really have a chance to be something completely different than what they've been historically.
The last few years have been about kind of Clipper rebranding, and you know, Lob City and Chris Paul and Blake Griffin and now Doc Rivers, and I think the big elephant in the room has always just been Donald Sterling. And no matter how much the Clippers changed on the court, no matter how many games they won, no matter how far they won in the playoffs, no matter how popular or polarizing they were, you know, Donald Sterling was still around. And I think that, you know, we kind of all knew as people who've watched this team and followed this team for a long time, at some point that was going to come and kind of bite them in the butt. And it just so happened that it happened of all times during the playoffs. A really unfortunate timing, but, you know, this was kind of a blessing in disguise. And I think it did have a palpable impact on the team, negatively to an extent of just hurting their on-court performance. But in the long run, I think this is a great thing. I think they can finally move on. I think we're going to get to kind of the branding of the team and team name and stuff later on, but I really think this is just a fresh start, a new beginning, and you can kind of finally see like the cycle of revival is kind of finally complete now. You know, once this sale officially goes through.
And for those who don't know, Steve Ballmer is a guy who's been trying to get an NBA team for, it seems like, forever. He tried to buy the Kings when they were sold, and Maloof sold them a few years back and moved them to Seattle, and he failed on that. He was putting in bids, heavily bidding for the Milwaukee Bucks, who just sold for, I think it was $550 million just a couple of months ago to the the Edens and the Lazaries, and now all of a sudden he gets his hands on the Clippers and just puts in. It's almost like he said, you know what, I lost the Bucks and I lost the Kings. Screw it. I'm just giving everything that I can possibly give to buy the Clippers, right? I mean, it seems like this guy really, really just wants to be in the NBA owner fraternity, right, Jovan?
Yeah. I saw an interview he had with the LA Times. It was 14 minutes long, I recommend anyone watching this go watch that. It was really insightful. You kind of got to see his personality. I know people have tweeted out the link to that kind of crazy intro he had at like a Microsoft convention where he's just going crazy and screaming and dancing and saying, "I love this company," and all this stuff. But that just shows this guy's really passionate. He's really smart, really passionate. I think his net worth's $20 billion, so he becomes now the richest owner in the NBA, which is awesome to kind of have for the Clippers. And you know, the biggest things I took away from just watching that interview and kind of seeing what he had to say was, you know, he wants to keep the team in LA, which is probably the biggest thing for fans out here is they want the team to stay in LA. But he's not a racist or a degenerate, and he's super passionate about making this team into a championship contender every single season. And you know, he even hinted that he's willing to pay into the luxury tax. And there are only a handful or so owners who are willing to do that or have the financial means to really do that and not really be affected. So I think, you know, if the Clippers can do that with the market already in LA, I think it just takes them to a whole nother level, potentially, as just being a perennial contender, being a team that's going to spend into the luxury tax. Obviously, he's a smart guy, so I think he's going to get, you know, some smart people in the front office. And, you know, I really think that this can be a really big deal in the long run.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And one of the things that I took away from watching that interview was that he was articulating a deep desire to make this team a championship winner, not a contender, but to win championships. And the way he talked about it, there was a sense of savvy and poise and commitment, and I just don't think I've ever heard anything remotely like that from Donald Sterling. I've never heard him say anything like, we're trying to win, in any way that made me feel like he meant it in the slightest. And I know that that's like wanting to win seems like a kind of low bar for an owner, but just seeing someone with that kind of attitude and expressing it and kind of being on screen and answering questions about sports like an intelligent person was just such a night and day experience.
Yeah, you know, Patrick, I think we'd all agree by saying that wanting to win is a low bar for an owner, but I think we'd also all agree when we say that Donald Sterling managed to set the bar pretty low. So I don't know if that's a crazy statement on your part. That actually leads to a good question we got from Timmy the Tooth on Twitter, which is, who cares about the tax? Should I adopt this as my life motto moving forward? Yeah, like Patrick and Jovan both said, Ballmer seems like a guy who wants to win. He's got loads and loads of money. We're going, from a guy who, never really wanted to go into the tax, though the Clippers did go into the tax this year, but never showed a willingness to spend until recent years at all. It wasn't just money on the roster. I mean, it was that he didn't want to pay employees much. He would sue coaches for not, because he didn't want to. He would have lawsuits with coaches because he didn't want to pay those guys after he fired them. There would be, issues where he didn't want to dole out money for a quality practice facility for the Clippers for the first 2 decades that they were in existence. The Clippers just didn't even have a practice facility because Sterling didn't want to pay for a quality one. They were really the last NBA team to get a decent NBA quality practice facility. I mean, there are all of these things where he didn't want to dole out money, and it seems like Ballmer is kind of going to be the opposite of that. So, though the Clippers did pay the tax this year, is it possible that, it's kind of impossible for us to say because we're speculating here, but is it a reasonable assumption to make that, maybe the Ballmer won't turn into Mikhail Prokhorov and the Clippers will be paying an $89 million luxury tax bill? But Patrick, is it fair to say that maybe we shouldn't necessarily worry about a team that already has 2 max contracts going into the tax? They have free agents coming up. DeAndre Jordan's upcoming free agency is going to be a big deal heading into the end of next year and things along those lines. So is that something that maybe Clippers fans have worried about in the past that we shouldn't worry about as much now?
I don't know exactly what the answer is in terms of how deep we should expect the team to go into the tax, to whether it makes things irrelevant. I don't know if that's going to be the case. DeAndre is going to be a huge deal because there's just so many questions about how you put a value on it. He presumably is going to be making more money than on this previous contract, and it's almost you almost wonder if the best thing for the Clippers would be for DeAndre not to get drastically better next year, counterintuitive as that might sound. But we'll see. I don't know what that means. I think for quite a long time, with all due respect to the good performances they've had from say Caron Butler and Matt Barnes in recent years, the Clippers have always had a hole at the small forward position, and it's felt like something that has really held this team back the whole time Blake Griffin and Chris Paul have been together, and so if they can really shore that up and bring in a quality free agent there while also kind of balancing the other financial needs that they have, that would be great for the team. It's going to be a big challenge. You'd like to hope that this new owner can kind of let his management team do the job they're meant to do, and pay for the best outcome.
Right. So LeBron to the Clippers is probably going to happen, is what you're saying.
He joked about it. I mean, without saying anything. He gave a wink in that interview.
Well, the wink is all that matters.
The wink is saying everyone wants LeBron. Of course, we want LeBron. I'm not going to get accused of tampering on my first interview.
Taking lessons from Phil Jackson while he's at it. Let's move on to something that Jovan mentioned before. I know Jovan thinks that the Clippers should change their team name. I'm against it. Patrick, I don't know where you stand. So let's start with you. Do the Clippers need to rebrand and change their name and kind of eliminate their history right now, or should they be moving forward as kind of a changed and progressed organization?
It's two interesting schools of thought there. Do you wear your history on your sleeve, or do you, tear everything to the ground and build anew? It's kind of like a European versus American approach to thing. In Europe, the buildings have been there for centuries, and there's kind of a sense of history there, good or bad, built into everything, and a kind of knowledge passed down from generation. Here, we haven't been around as long, but we like to knock stuff down and put up something new. So I could see merit on both sides. I like the idea of keeping the name for continuity, but doing a rebrand in terms of, say, colors, logo, all that stuff, like making, a kind of a substantive change, but one that still acknowledges, the continuity of the franchise.
I agree with Patrick in that sense that they just need to make a change. I'm personally in support of just changing the name too, but if they change the color scheme, or at least the logo at the very least, like I just think you look at it and basically the entire time, might have been a few year difference, but basically the entire time they've been the Clippers, they've been owned by Donald Sterling, and you just look at 30 years of losing. When people think of the Clippers, they think of the Sports Illustrated cover with two fans with bags on their head that says worst franchise in sports, and having the worst owner in sports and just continually losing. And I think that's kind of changed the last few seasons. But if this team wasn't as good as they currently were and were a 20-25 win team, would we even care if they changed? I think it's kind of a little bit of a recency bias that now they're good. That could be swaying us to be like, well, let's just write out the Clippers name. I kind of like people. There's been a bunch of different names, but I kind of like Los Angeles Stars personally. And I know they had those ABA jerseys, kind of baby blue and red. So you could still even keep similar colorway, but kind of throw it back a bit in Stars LA. That kind of makes sense, and I just kind of think that they've gone 90% of just changing the culture, bringing in the highest paid coach in the league, having 2 top 10 players and max guys, might be a third now in DeAndre, having the richest owner in the league. Like this has been a complete 360 with how things are run with this team. I think the final step is just getting rid of the name that is associated with Sterling. Like, it's not. I just can't really divorce the name from Sterling because he's basically been the owner the entire time they've been the Clippers since they moved from Buffalo to San Diego. I don't know the exact. I don't know if there was a little overlap or whatever, but he's basically been the owner since they've been the Clippers. So just get rid of that final step, final piece, whatever, and just start over something new.
I do find it funny that in the American sports conversation, it almost seems like the term Clippers is more offensive to people now than Redskins, which really I think shows where our priorities are as like a sports watching culture. I don't necessarily know if they should change their name, and we're going to finish up in a second, but I think it's nice. It would be so nice to see the Clippers win something. No one thought the Clippers could win anything, and if you just take away the Clippers and you just kind of throw them away like they're trash, and all of a sudden the Clippers were a failed franchise then, and they're so close to not being one. They're so close to getting there and kind of wiping away the history and kind of making it. Once you get the championship, the rest is kind of irrelevant. Everyone forgets about it. People have such short memories. If Ballmer comes in and they start paying money, people are going to forget about Sterling within a year. People forget about this stuff all the time, and people forgot about the housing discrimination suits. I have to imagine, even though this was more public, they'll have the morals to forget about this as well because they forgot about things that were way worse. I'm one to think that as a Clippers fan, it would be nice to have some justification for rooting for a team that was so downtrodden for so many years, to have some sort of there to be proven that there was some sort of means to an end. But that's just me. If they were to change the name, and by the by, about the LA Stars, fun fact: Scott Brooks was an assistant on that team in 2000-2001 season, which I didn't know till I Wikipedia'd them today, and it still might not be true because Wikipedia is not incredibly accurate, and it might be a different Scott Brooks. But I'm pretty sure it was Scott Brooks. Anyway, it's going to be very interesting moving forward with it. Jovan, final word. What would you prefer, logo change or uniform change?
Both. I would say between the two, I would take the logo change.
All right, I think I agree with that. I would be okay with a Clippers logo change. I think I could deal with that. They went to another Clippers logo. I think that would be fine. Teams change their logos all the time, and the Clippers have kind of always had a very similar one. But that's going to do it for us. We got Game 1 of the Finals starting in about 5 minutes if you're watching live. If not, then Game 1 of the Finals already happened, and what a great game, right? For Jovan Buha, Patrick James, I'm Fred Katz. We'll be back at you with a lot of off-season CBLs, discussing free agency, draft, all that fun stuff. So we'll see you soon. Good night.